He told me he was going for a walk. It was raining, and Daniel hates the rain. I stood there, soaking in the lie like the storm pounding our windows. A decade of sacrifices, all the dreams I shelved, the job offers I declined, the sleepless nights I spent holding his broken pieces together, cracked under the weight of one casual betrayal. Just going for a walk. 8 words that detonated everything. I gave everything to him, supported him through his panic attacks, smiled through the cold silences, pretended not to notice how his work nights got later, how my needs became invisible, and every time I cracked, he brushed it off. You're too emotional. You're imagining things. Don't be so dramatic. But I wasn't imagining her. I saw them, laughing, her wearing my hoodie like she'd earned it. And that was the moment something inside me stopped begging to be loved and started demanding to be seen. He thought he could walk all over me because I was soft, because I stayed, because I loved too deeply. But I'm not soft anymore. I'm Claire, and this is the story of how I stopped surviving and started taking my power back. It started with a lie so simple, so casual, that I almost believed it. Just going for a walk to clear my head, he had texted. 8 harmless words. No red flags, no reason to doubt, except there was, because it was raining, and Daniel hates the rain. I stood in our dimly lit kitchen, phone in hand, staring out the window as fat droplets drummed against the glass. My gut churned, the kind of slow, creeping unease that slinks in when something just doesn't feel right. I tried to brush it off. Maybe he needed space. Maybe he wanted to be alone. But I knew better. We'd been married for 6 years. Together for almost 10. I knew how he moved, how he thought, how his voice dipped when he lied. I told myself not to overreact, but something in me snapped that night. A quiet defiance, a sliver of instinct. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I opened the tracking app on my phone. The one he swore was only for emergencies. The one he insisted he never used. His dot pulsed 4 blocks away, parked outside an apartment complex I didn't recognize. I watched it sit there, not moving, not walking, certainly not out for a walk. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my keys, threw on the first jacket I could find, and drove. I didn't know what I expected. Maybe he was meeting a friend. Maybe I'd look like a jealous fool. But I needed the truth. No more half answers. No more gaslighting. As I pulled up to the building, my headlights flashed across a figure stepping into the foyer. My heart stopped. It was him. But he wasn't alone. She was tall, brunette, wearing his hoodie, the one I bought him last Christmas. Her hand brushed his lower back as she laughed, tipping her head toward his. He leaned in, smiling, relaxed, comfortable, like he'd done this 100 times before. My breath caught. My hands clenched the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. He wasn't walking. He wasn't thinking. He wasn't clearing his head. He was cheating, and I had just caught him red-handed. I watched them disappear through the glass doors, swallowed by the elevator. I didn't follow. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Not then. I just sat there in silence, letting the betrayal settle like cold ash in my chest. In that moment, I knew everything had changed. The man I had built a life with, the one I supported, through unemployment, the one I stayed up with during his panic attacks, the one I believed would never do this, had become a stranger. And I was done being the woman who waited at home, making excuses for his absence. I drove home slowly, the rain turning the windshield into a blur. My mind wasn't racing, it was calculating. I wasn't going to beg him to stay. I wasn't going to confront him in tears and demand answers. I had something better in mind. A storm was coming, not just the one pouring outside, but the one I was about to unleash. Because he thought he had control. He thought he could deceive me, live a double life, and still come home like nothing had changed. But I was done being the background character in his narrative. From this moment on, I was writing my own story, and it would end with him on his knees. The next morning, he came home like nothing had happened, his hair damp from the rain, hoodie half-zipped, face unreadable. He gave me a tired smile and said, "I ended up walking longer than I thought. Needed to think." Think. That word again. I stood by the sink, pretending to rinse out my coffee mug, trying to keep my hands from shaking. Every muscle in my body tensed with the effort of staying silent. I wanted to scream at him, throw the mug across the room, demand to know who she was, how long it had been, and why the hell he thought I was too stupid to figure it out. But I didn't. Not yet. Because what he didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that I had seen everything. I had the time-stamped location. I had a mental snapshot of the woman who wore his clothes like they belonged to her. I had my first taste of his lies laid bare. I said nothing. I just nodded, gave a tight smile, and turned back to the sink. And in that silence, I began to see the pattern with clarity. The late work nights, the last-minute conference calls, the sudden obsession with going to the gym alone, even though he hated working out. It all clicked into place like a sick puzzle finally snapping shut. It wasn't just one mistake. This had been going on for months. And the more I paid attention, the more I saw how deep the betrayal went, the subtle financial shifts, extra charges on our joint card from restaurants I'd never been to, boutique shops I'd never stepped foot in, the way he'd started changing his passwords, the guarded look he gave when his phone buzzed, and he turned the screen away from me. The increasing emotional distance, the way conversations became curt, the kisses mechanical. He was slipping away piece by piece, and I hadn't even realized it until now. But what hit the hardest wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the way he treated me like a fool, like I wouldn't notice, like I didn't matter enough to deserve the truth. I started digging. A week passed. I watched him like a hawk. I played the dutiful wife. I kept dinners on the table, smiled when his mother called, made small talk about work. All the while, I was documenting everything, every suspicious charge, every late night out, every lie. I started following the patterns of his deception like clockwork. Tuesday nights, always gym night. But his gym bag would come home untouched, and he'd smell like a cologne I never bought. Thursdays, team drinks. But there were no bar tabs, no coworkers mentioned by name, just more time spent somewhere else. With her. And while the betrayal tore at me, hollowed me out in ways I can't even explain, I refused to let it destroy me. Instead, I let it shape me. I started remembering who I was before him. The woman who got her master's while working 2 jobs. The woman who stood by her father's hospital bed for 7 straight days without sleep. The woman who had power, fire, and a backbone. I had given so much of myself to our marriage that I'd forgotten I was whole on my own. But now I was wide awake, and I realized something important. This wasn't just a man who cheated. This was a man who was trying to erase me slowly, sneak out the back door of our life without taking accountability. And I wasn't going to let him. If he thought he could rewrite our story with another woman, he was about to find out just how wrong he was. Because if he wanted to play dirty, he had just unknowingly started a war. And I was done playing fair. At first, I told myself it was just about the cheating, the lying, the betrayal. But as the days passed, I began to see the bigger picture, and it was uglier than I could have imagined. This wasn't just about love lost. This was about control, about erasure, about how easily someone you trust can dismantle your entire life behind your back. Daniel wasn't just stepping out on me. He was preparing to leave me behind entirely and take everything with him. I discovered the first red flag while sorting through our bills. He had slowly been transferring money out of our joint savings into an account I didn't recognize. At first it was small, $200 here, $500 there, amounts that wouldn't immediately catch my attention. But over 6 months, it added up to nearly $12,000. $12,000. Money we had saved for a house, for our future, for the kids we were planning to have. He was bleeding our account dry in secret, and I was funding his affair without even knowing it. Then came the insurance documents. I found a folder tucked away in the bottom drawer of his home office. He'd changed the beneficiary on his life insurance policy from me to his business partner. A name I didn't recognize until I Googled her. It was her. The woman in the apartment, the one in my hoodie. She wasn't a business partner. She was a bartender at one of his team drinks locations. 26, freshly divorced, and clearly the recipient of every lie he had ever told me. I stared at her LinkedIn profile with a kind of cold, detached fury. She had no idea I existed. Not really. I wasn't mentioned in her comments, her photos, her stories. It was as if Daniel had created an entirely separate life, and I was the ghost haunting the background. I felt invisible in my own marriage, and what made it worse? He was already preparing for the exit, canceling subscriptions in both our names, redirecting mail to a P.O. box. I even found a draft of a lease agreement, an apartment in his name, ready to go in 3 weeks. He wasn't just cheating. He was leaving me behind and making sure I got nothing on his way out. No closure, no honesty, no financial security. It wasn't heartbreak, it was betrayal at a strategic level. And the more I uncovered, the more I realized just how expendable he thought I was, like I was just some chapter he could close when it no longer served him. A placeholder until he found something better, someone younger, easier. But this wasn't just about me. It was about the years I sacrificed to support his ambitions. The jobs I turned down so we could move for his promotions. The family I kept at a distance because he didn't like their opinions. The way I put his mental health above my own for years, comforting him through every setback while he chipped away at my confidence. He had built himself up on my back, and now he was planning to disappear and pretend none of it ever happened. And that I couldn't let go. Because if he succeeded in walking away without consequences, I knew I would carry the weight forever. The resentment, the injustice, the feeling of being discarded like trash. No, this was bigger than just heartbreak. This was about reclaiming my voice, my worth, my power. He didn't just lie to me. He tried to erase me. But I wasn't going to let him write the ending. He could take his fake walks, his secret accounts, and his smug little smirks. But I was about to show him what it looked like when the woman you underestimated becomes the storm you never saw coming. Because he may have started this betrayal in silence, but I was going to end it loud, and I wasn't just going to survive it. I was going to make sure he never forgot it. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But I wasn't interested in theatrics or explosions. I didn't want chaos. I wanted precision. I wanted permanence. I wanted him to feel the slow, tightening grip of consequences, the kind that couldn't be undone with an apology or a second chance. So I made a plan. The first rule, he couldn't suspect a thing. I kept playing the part. Dinner ready at 7. A kiss on the cheek when he walked through the door. Light chatter about my boring workday. I even faked a headache to get out of sex. He barely noticed, probably relieved. Every time I looked at him, I pictured that night in the rain. Him laughing with her like I never existed. That memory kept me sharp, focused, unshakable. I started with information, hard evidence. I took screenshots of his transactions, his messages when he left his laptop unlocked, and the photo of her in the hoodie from that night. I dug into our financials, printed bank statements, and highlighted every unexplained expense. I collected everything, dates, times, names. My living room became a war room. Then I quietly met with a lawyer, a friend of my cousin's, discreet and brutally efficient. I laid everything on the table. His cheating, the money siphoning, the insurance policy switch. She didn't flinch. He's laying the groundwork to walk away clean, she said. But we're going to make sure he doesn't. With her help, I filed for legal separation without telling him. She instructed me to act normal until we had everything in place. Meanwhile, she froze the joint accounts and helped me open one in my name only. I redirected my paycheck there and removed myself from anything he could drain. I even beat him to the lease he thought I didn't know about. Called the landlord, sent over proof of our marriage and his intention to abandon assets, and made it legally impossible for him to take possession of the unit without facing penalties. While he was planning his new life, I was quietly locking every exit. I also contacted our insurance provider and filed an official dispute for the beneficiary change. Turns out he forged my signature twice. That was another nail in the coffin, documented and notarized. Then came the emotional strike. I contacted the woman, the mistress. Not with hate, not with threats, just truth. I sent her a calm, composed message. I told her who I was, how long we'd been married, what I had discovered. I attached a photo from our wedding, one from last year's anniversary dinner, and a PDF of our bank account showing her restaurant charges. I don't know what he told you, I wrote, but here's what he didn't. She didn't respond. Immediately, but I knew it landed. Then, I set the final piece in motion. I scheduled a dinner, just the two of us. I picked a nice place, his favorite. I wore the dress he always said made me look powerful. And I smiled, the kind of smile that makes people nervous. When he sat down across from me, I saw it in his eyes. He thought I was forgiving him, that I was leaning into our routine, folding into the mold he'd carved out for me. He had no idea what was coming. We ordered drinks. We toasted to us. And as he leaned in to tell me about his fake day at work, I stopped him. "There's something I need to tell you," I said. His smile faltered for half a second. I reached into my purse, pulled out the thick envelope of documents and placed it on the table. "Read it," I said calmly. "Then we'll talk." His hands shook as he flipped through them: bank records, insurance forms, photos, legal documents, the separation notice, and then the cherry on top. A signed statement from his business partner confirming their relationship, time-stamped. Just 2 days earlier. He paled. For the first time in months, he had nothing to say, and I was just getting started. The moment I watched his face drain of color, I knew I had taken back the narrative. But this wasn't just about retribution, it was about protecting myself, preserving everything he thought I was too broken, too naive, or too in love to fight for. And now that the confrontation had begun, it was time to tighten the net. Step 1. Establish legal and financial independence. The very next morning after the dinner, I moved forward with filing the formal divorce paperwork. My lawyer had been prepared. We submitted everything within hours. Because I had already frozen the joint accounts, opened new lines of credit in my name, and documented the asset transfers he attempted, there was very little he could do to sabotage me financially. I made sure my name was off any shared liability, car loans, utilities, credit cards. I even had our home appraised to ensure he couldn't lowball me during the property division process. I wasn't just trying to leave. With something, I was making sure he didn't walk away with everything. Step 2. Document everything. I can't stress this enough. I made 3 physical copies of every piece of evidence and stored them in different places: my lawyer's office, my home safe, and with a trusted friend. I also scanned everything to a secure cloud drive under a new private email account. Every shady transaction, every email, every phone record, every message, every invoice from her boutique perfume shop charged to our card. All of it. I treated it like a case file, because that's what it was. When people cheat and lie, they don't just break your heart. They often try to manipulate reality, rewrite the past, pretend it wasn't as bad as it was. Having the truth, in black and white, stripped him of that power. Step 3. Control the narrative. Daniel tried to get ahead of the story, of course. Called mutual friends, claimed I had overreacted, that we had been drifting apart for a long time, that his new relationship just happened, that I was being vindictive. But I didn't engage in public mudslinging. I didn't stoop to his level. I let the facts speak for themselves. I spoke to the right people, those who mattered. I told my truth calmly, clearly, and with evidence. I didn't ask for sympathy. I let people come to their own conclusions. The silence that followed from his side of the circle told me everything I needed to know. Step 4. Protect your emotional space. As much as I wanted to keep fighting, proving I was right, that he was the liar, that I was the victim, I also realized how much space he'd already taken up in my head. I needed boundaries. So I went to therapy. I cut off all non-essential communication with him, using our lawyers as intermediaries. I stopped stalking her Instagram or checking to see if he was still active online. Because here's the truth: revenge is only satisfying if you don't let it consume you. The power move isn't in staying angry. It's in moving on, healed and unbothered, while they're stuck in the wreckage they created. Step 5. Reclaim your identity. For so long, my life had been wrapped up in us. But now I had a clean slate. I pulled out the list I'd made years ago, books I wanted to read, places I wanted to travel, things I'd always wanted to try but never had time for. I dyed my hair. I took a solo trip. I applied for the promotion I'd been too scared to go after. I said yes to dinners, walks, conversations that weren't about him. I reconnected with friends I had distanced myself from because he didn't like them. Every step was like breathing again after being underwater too long. Because the real win isn't just making them regret what they did. It's reminding yourself of who you are. And I was done surviving. I was rebuilding. I didn't expect the final confrontation to be quiet, but that's exactly what it was. No yelling, no slammed doors, just a hollow silence filled with all the things he couldn't explain and everything I didn't need to say anymore. It happened 3 weeks after the dinner. By then, the divorce papers had been served, the accounts divided, and the people in our lives had stopped asking questions and started picking sides. Most picked mine. The few who didn't, I let them go. Daniel showed up at the apartment to collect the last of his things, what I hadn't already set aside in neatly labeled boxes. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching as he moved. With a kind of defeated energy. The confidence he used to carry like a second skin had worn thin. He looked smaller. I didn't speak until he reached the door. "You know," I said, "for someone who thought he was so clever, you were painfully predictable." He stopped, eyes locked on the floor. "I thought you'd be angrier," he muttered. I raised an eyebrow. "You don't get to dictate how I heal. You burned down a life I helped build, and I still made sure you didn't walk out of it penniless. Or in jail. You're welcome." That got a flicker of emotion in his eyes. Shame, maybe, or guilt, but it was too late for those things. They were luxuries I had stopped affording him. "You didn't have to make it this public," he said. Weakly, I almost laughed. "You made it public. I just held up a mirror." And then I closed the door behind him, gently, like punctuation at the end of a chapter. That moment didn't come with fireworks or applause, but it came with peace. It was the day I realized I didn't need revenge anymore. I had already won. Because what Daniel lost wasn't just a wife. He lost me, the version of me who trusted him, who protected his reputation, who defended him when he didn't deserve it. Who would have followed him to the ends of the earth just to watch him succeed? He replaced that woman with a stranger in a borrowed hoodie. But what he'll never replace is the life he sabotaged, the loyalty he squandered. And me? I gained everything. I gained clarity, boundaries, confidence, a spine that didn't bend for breadcrumbs of affection. I found love again, not in another person, but in myself. In my routines, my laughter, my silence, my resilience. And somewhere along the way, karma showed up too. His perfect relationship imploded after 3 months. Turns out the woman he left me for didn't appreciate being lied to either. She sent me a thank you message, believe it or not, and mentioned she was looking into pressing charges for some financial misrepresentations. I didn't pry. That wasn't my battle anymore. Work didn't go well for him either. Once word got around about the forged insurance forms and the embezzlement-level money transfers, his company started asking uncomfortable questions. He quietly resigned before an official investigation could begin. Last I heard, he was couch surfing and trying to freelance. And I'm thriving. I got the promotion. I'm moving into a new place, with big windows, real hardwood floors, and no shadows from my past in the corners. I even adopted a dog. His name is Rebel. Fitting, right? Sometimes people ask if I'd ever take Daniel back. Not a chance. Because when someone shows you who they are, over and over again, believe them. And when they try to break you, don't just survive it. Rise. Make your comeback louder than their betrayal. Let your silence be heavier than their excuses. And most of all, never forget that karma doesn't need your help. But sometimes you get to watch, and that's more than enough.